A mother is horrified when she discovers a video showing the terrifying things her daughter's stepfather does when she's not around. Emma fumbled with her keys at the front door, her hands unsteady. It had been a long day at work, and all she wanted was the comfort of seeing her daughter Chloe, her 5-year-old baby, greeting her at the door like always. But as she pushed open the door, something felt off. The house was too quiet, unnervingly so. "Chloe," she called out, stepping into the dimly lit living room. No answer. Usually Chloe would be there, her little feet running across the hardwood floor, arms wide open, ready for one of those warm hugs that made the day's stress melt away. But tonight, nothing. Emma's chest tightened. She glanced at the clock. It wasn't that late. Chloe should be downstairs, maybe watching TV or finishing up her homework. "Derek," she called out again, louder this time. Her husband Derek stepped out of the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel, a calm expression on his face. "Hey, you're home. Everything okay?" Emma ignored the question. "Where's Chloe? Why didn't she come say hi?" Derek shrugged, the towel draped over his shoulder. "She's probably in her room, on her phone. You know how kids are these days, always chatting with their friends online." Something didn't sit right with Emma. Chloe was always eager to see her when she got home. "She never misses a chance to greet me," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than to Derek. Without another word, she walked down the hallway toward Chloe's room, her footsteps echoing in the unnerving silence of the house. As she reached Chloe's door, Emma felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She knocked gently. "Chloe, sweetie?" No answer. She opened the door slowly. The room was empty, the bed neatly made. Emma's pulse quickened. If Chloe wasn't in her room, then where? That's when she heard it, a soft, muffled sob coming from the bathroom down the hall. Her heart leapt into her throat. She rushed toward the sound, the pit in her stomach growing with every step. Flinging the bathroom door open, she found Chloe curled up in the corner next to the toilet, barefoot, her hair messy, tears streaming down her face. "Chloe." Emma knelt beside her daughter, pulling her into her arms. Chloe clung to her, trembling. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" Emma's voice was soft, though panic bubbled just beneath the surface. Chloe didn't respond at first, just buried her face in Emma's shoulder, her small body shaking. Emma held her tighter, her mind racing through every possible scenario. Was she sick? Did something happen at school? Finally, in a voice so quiet, Emma almost missed it, Chloe whispered, I don't want to stay with him. I'm scared." Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. "What do you mean, sweetie? What are you scared of?" Chloe sniffled, but instead of answering, she pulled away slightly, glancing toward the door as if someone might be listening. The conjowl," she mumbled, her eyes wide with fear. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Her body hurt. What was she talking about? "Who, Chloe?" Emma asked, her voice low but full of urgency. "Who hurt you?" But Chloe didn't answer. She just shook her head and wrapped her arms tighter around her mother's neck, refusing to let go, her sobs filling the small bathroom. Emma's mind was spinning. What had Chloe just said? Something about her body hurting and being scared. Scared of who? Emma pulled Chloe back, holding her by the shoulders gently. "Chloe, you have to talk to me, sweetheart. What's going on? Does something hurt? Did something happen?" But the little girl just pressed her lips together and shook her head, tears still glistening in her eyes. Emma stood, her nerves fraying, and picked Chloe up, carrying her to the tub. "Let's get you cleaned up, okay? You'll feel better after a nice bath," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. But inside, a storm of questions raged. What was Chloe so afraid of? Why was she acting so strange? As the warm water ran, Emma undressed Chloe gently, helping her into the tub. Chloe remained silent, her small body still shaking slightly from whatever had rattled her. Emma sat on the edge of the tub, watching her daughter as the water filled around her. "Do you want to talk about it?" Emma asked softly, hoping to coax something out of her. Chloe didn't meet her eyes. She just shook her head again, her fingers tracing the water as it rippled in the tub. Emma swallowed hard, her mind racing back to what Chloe had said earlier. "I don't want to stay with him. I'm scared." Could she have been talking about Derek? The thought alone made her stomach churn. But that was ridiculous. Derek was kind, patient, always looking out for Chloe. There was no way he could. No, maybe she's just having a rough day. Emma tried to reassure herself, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. After the bath, Emma wrapped Chloe in a towel, carrying her to bed. She tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and grabbed the book from the nightstand that Chloe always loved. "You want me to read to you?" Chloe nodded quietly, her eyes already starting to droop from exhaustion. Emma began to read, but her mind wasn't on the story. It was on Chloe's words, those fearful whispers that echoed in her mind. What if there was more to this? What if something was really wrong? Downstairs, Derek waited at the dinner table, casually flipping through a magazine. "Is she okay?" he asked, when Emma walked into the kitchen. Emma studied him for a moment, watching the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers. "She was crying," Emma replied cautiously, "but I'm not sure what's wrong. She wouldn't talk." Derek shrugged, the same calmness about him as before. "She seemed fine earlier. Maybe something happened at school." "Maybe," Emma muttered, but the knot in her stomach only tightened. Something wasn't right. She could feel it. Emma sat at the edge of her bed that night, staring blankly at the wall, her fingers absently rubbing the smooth surface of the quilt beneath her. The house was silent now, save for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floor settling. Chloe was fast asleep upstairs, tucked into her bed after a long, tearful evening. But Emma's mind wouldn't quiet. Something wasn't right. She could feel it. That deep, gnawing unease that had settled in her gut the moment she found Chloe curled up in the bathroom. She replayed the scene over and over. Chloe's tear-streaked face, the way her small body had trembled in her arms, the fearful look in her eyes when she whispered those haunting words, "I'm scared of him." Emma couldn't shake it. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, didn't want to accuse her husband of something unimaginable. But the doubt had already been planted, and it was growing. Derek loves Chloe, she reminded herself for the 100th time. He had always been good to her. He was patient and kind, took her to the park, helped with her homework, and had never given Emma any reason to believe he would harm their daughter. But then again, Chloe wasn't his biological child, and lately there had been a shift, a tension she couldn't ignore. She glanced over at Derek, who was lying on the other side of the bed, already fast asleep. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, his face calm and relaxed. It seemed impossible that the man next to her, the man she had trusted with her life and the life of her daughter, could be at the center of Chloe's fear. But still, her stomach twisted with doubt. What if? What if she was wrong about him? The next morning, Emma decided she couldn't leave the unease unspoken any longer. After Chloe had left for school, she found Derek in the kitchen, sipping coffee and reading the paper like any other day. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him, trying to reconcile the calm image in front of her with the thoughts swirling in her head. "Derek?" she started, her voice betraying her nerves. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, I need to talk to you about something," she said, stepping into the kitchen. She felt her heart pound as she searched for the right words. "Last night, Chloe." She seemed really upset. "She told me she was scared. Of you." Derek blinked, his face immediately darkening with confusion. "Scared of me? Why would she say that?" Emma shifted on her feet, unsure how to proceed. She wouldn't tell me why, but she said her body hurt. "I just need to know if something happened." "Did something happen yesterday?" Derek set his coffee down, his expression hardening slightly. "I didn't do anything to her, Emma. I would never hurt Chloe." His voice was firm, a mix of hurt and indignation. "I did have to discipline her yesterday, though. She was being rude, talking back, and I told her to go to her room. That's all. I didn't think she'd take it so hard." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly followed by a lingering uncertainty. "She said her body hurt," Emma pressed gently. "Are you sure nothing else happened?" "I'm sure," Derek replied a little too quickly. "I didn't touch her, other than to send her to her room. Maybe she's just, I don't know, going through a phase or something. Kids get dramatic sometimes." Emma nodded, trying to force herself to believe him. He had never given her a reason to doubt him before. Maybe Chloe had overreacted. Maybe it really was just a misunderstanding. But the gnawing doubt didn't leave her. And over the next few days, she noticed that Chloe's behavior only grew stranger. It started with the small things. Chloe would flinch slightly when Derek walked into the room, or she would quietly slip away when he tried to talk to her. She stopped eating dinner at the table with them, instead retreating to her room early, avoiding her stepfather's presence entirely. And every time Emma asked her what was wrong, Chloe would look at her with those wide, fearful eyes and say nothing. Then came the nightmares. It was just after midnight when Emma was jolted awake by the sound of Chloe's screams echoing down the hallway. She bolted out of bed, her heart pounding, and raced to Chloe's room. She found her daughter tangled in her blankets, her face drenched in sweat, crying and thrashing in her sleep. Don't do it. Please don't hurt me." Chloe's voice cracked through sobs, her small hands gripping the sheets as if trying to fend off some invisible force. Emma knelt beside her bed, shaking her awake. "Chloe, baby, it's okay. It's just a dream. I'm here. I'm right here." Chloe's eyes fluttered open, wide and full of terror, as if she wasn't sure if she was still trapped in the nightmare or back in her room. She threw herself into her mother's arms, clinging to her like she was her only anchor to reality. "It was just a bad dream," Emma whispered, stroking her hair. "You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you." Chloe didn't say anything, but Emma felt the tension in her small body, the fear that seemed to have burrowed deep into her bones. When she finally calmed down and fell back asleep, Emma stayed by her side, her mind reeling. The nightmares had become more frequent, and they all seemed to center around the same terrifying theme: someone hurting her. And Chloe's fear during the day wasn't just a coincidence. Emma had tried to convince herself that Derek was innocent, that there was no way he could be the reason for Chloe's distress. But the pieces weren't adding up. She couldn't ignore the growing evidence. Chloe's nightmares, her reluctance to be around Derek, and her chilling silence every time Emma asked if something was wrong. A week later, when Emma came home from work and didn't hear Chloe's usual greeting, her heart sank. Not again, she thought, as she rushed upstairs. She found Chloe curled up in the closet, her tiny body trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. Emma knelt in front of her, gently prying her daughter from the corner. "Chloe, sweetheart, what's going on? Why are you hiding?" Chloe didn't answer, only wrapped her arms around Emma, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Emma's heart broke, but with it came a rising sense of urgency. She couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was terribly wrong, and no matter how much she wanted to believe Derek was innocent, her mother's instinct was screaming at her that he wasn't. She had to find out what was really going on. The next morning, after Derek left for his usual walk, Emma made her decision. She couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Her mother's intuition screamed at her that something was terribly wrong, and the pit in her stomach hadn't gone away. The only way to silence that nagging voice inside her was to get answers. The hardware store wasn't far from their suburban home. As she walked through the aisles, her eyes scanning the shelves for exactly what she needed, she felt the weight of her decision. This wasn't just about suspicion anymore. It was about protection. If she didn't do something now, what would happen to Chloe? She found the small security cameras tucked away on a side shelf, inconspicuous and perfect for what she had in mind. Emma felt a knot tighten in her chest as she grabbed a set, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them in her cart. Installing cameras in her own home to spy on her own family, it felt like an invasion of privacy. But what choice did she have? Chloe's words haunted her, and she knew she couldn't leave anything to chance. Emma returned home just as quietly as she had left, making sure Chloe was still at school, and Derek wouldn't be back for at least an hour. She moved quickly but carefully, placing the cameras in areas where they wouldn't be easily noticed. One went in Chloe's room, hidden behind a framed picture on her dresser, another in the hallway outside her door, and one more in the living room, where Chloe and Derek usually spent time together. Her heart pounded with each move, her breath shallow as she worked to hide the evidence of her surveillance. Emma prayed she was wrong, that the cameras would show nothing more than an overworked mother's imagination. Days passed, and Emma's anxiety grew with each moment of watching and waiting. She would check the footage late at night after Derek had fallen asleep, the blue glow of her laptop casting eerie shadows on the walls. But at first, there was nothing that confirmed her suspicions. Derek seemed calm and collected around Chloe, but Chloe's response was anything but comfortable. Whenever he entered a room, Chloe would tense up, her eyes darting toward Emma, as if silently pleading for rescue. She would shrink back when Derek approached, sometimes moving to another part of the room entirely, or clutching her stuffed bear tighter to her chest, her small hands trembling. One evening, Derek had tried to sit beside Chloe on the couch while Emma prepared dinner. Chloe immediately stood up, mumbling an excuse about needing to use the bathroom. Emma noticed the way Chloe's feet moved quickly, almost frantic, as if she couldn't get away fast enough. Derek had glanced after her, but Emma caught something in his expression, a flicker of frustration, almost impatience, before his face settled back into its usual calm facade. It was a pattern. Chloe avoided being near Derek at all costs. She barely spoke to him, and if he addressed her, she would mutter a quick, fearful response before fleeing the room. There was no laughter, no affection, only tense silences and wide, terrified eyes. One afternoon, as Emma went about her usual routine of cleaning the house, she picked up Chloe's favorite stuffed bear from the floor. It was a pink teddy bear that Chloe had carried around since she was a toddler, the fur worn and slightly matted from years of love and attention. As she smoothed the bear's fur, something strange caught her eye. One of the bear's eyes seemed to glint differently in the light. Emma frowned, turning the bear in her hands to get a closer look. The eye wasn't just shiny, it was reflecting light in a way that didn't seem normal. Her fingers traced over the plastic surface, and suddenly she felt a small bump beneath the fur, something hard and foreign. Her heart sank as she realized what it was, a camera. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the bear, the realization washing over her like ice water. This wasn't just a toy, someone had hidden a camera inside it. Emma's mind raced. How long had it been there? Who put it there? And most importantly, why? She thought of Derek. He was the only one who had access to Chloe's room when she wasn't around. He had always been so attentive, so involved with her daily life. But now, all of that attentiveness felt wrong, invasive. Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she clutched the bear to her chest, her mind reeling. If Derek had planted that camera, what else had he been hiding? The possibility that her husband had been spying on Chloe made her stomach turn. It wasn't just about discipline anymore. It was about control, about power. She placed the bear back on Chloe's shelf, her hands trembling as she tried to regain control of her emotions. She couldn't confront Derek yet, not without knowing more. She had to keep watching, had to be sure, before she made any accusations. That night, Emma lay in bed next to Derek, her mind spinning with the weight of her discovery. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the bear's eye glinting in the light, a silent witness to something she couldn't yet fully comprehend. Derek slept soundly beside her, oblivious to the storm raging in her mind. The next day, Emma checked the hidden cameras again. She scoured the footage, looking for anything that might explain why Derek would have planted that camera. And then she saw it. Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her heart pounding in her chest. She hit play, and the screen flickered to life, revealing a grainy view of Chloe's bedroom. It was late at night, the soft glow of a nightlight casting eerie shadows across the small room. Chloe was already in bed, her tiny frame barely visible under the blanket, but her body was rigid, not relaxed like a child should be while sleeping. The air in the room felt thick with tension, even through the screen. And then, the door creaked open. Derek slipped into the room, moving with a practiced silence that sent a chill down Emma's spine. He didn't turn on the light. He didn't need to. He knew exactly where everything was, and as he approached Chloe's bed, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The way he moved, slow and deliberate, reminded her of a predator stalking its prey. She could feel the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Chloe's body tensed under the covers, and Emma noticed the subtle shift in her daughter's breathing. It became faster, shallow, like a trapped animal bracing for the inevitable. Chloe didn't stir, didn't turn her head. She just lay there, frozen, as Derek stood over her bed. Emma's pulse quickened, her hands shaking slightly as she watched Derek sit on the edge of Chloe's bed. His hand reached out, slowly brushing a lock of hair from her daughter's forehead. A gesture that might have seemed paternal to an outsider, but to Emma, it was something far darker. Chloe's body tightened even more, her small hands gripping the edge of the blanket until her knuckles turned white. Then Derek leaned down, his face hovering just inches above Chloe's ear. "You know the rules," he whispered, his voice low, cold, and filled with menace. "If you say anything, if you tell your mother, I'll make sure you never see her again, and she'll never know why." Emma's stomach churned. She had to pause the video, bile rising in her throat. She pressed her palm against her mouth, trying to steady her breathing. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to not watch another second, but she forced herself to continue. She had to know the full truth. For Chloe. When she hit play again, the scene picked up with Derek pulling the blanket back slightly, exposing Chloe's small, fragile body to the dim light of the room. His hand hovered over her, and Emma's whole world seemed to freeze. Chloe didn't move. She lay completely still, eyes wide open in the darkness, tears silently streaming down her cheeks as Derek's fingers trailed along her arm. Emma wanted to scream, to rip the screen off her desk, to burst into the past and pull Chloe from that room. The horror of what she was witnessing, of what her daughter had been enduring, hit her like a freight train. And then, as if aware of the camera, Derek straightened up. He glanced around the room briefly, suspicion crossing his face, but it quickly faded. His hand returned to Chloe, resting on her stomach, his fingers digging just enough to make Chloe flinch, but not enough to leave a visible mark. "Remember," he whispered again, his voice dripping with control. "You tell, and I'll hurt her. I'll hurt you too. Understand?" Chloe didn't respond, but her terrified expression said everything. The clip ended with Derek standing, casually pulling the blanket back over Chloe as if nothing had happened. He slipped out of the room, closing the door behind him without a sound. Emma sat back, the video ending in eerie silence. Her body felt numb, her mind reeling from what she had just witnessed. She couldn't process it all at once, couldn't reconcile the image of her husband, of the man she had trusted, with the monster she had just seen on the screen. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away with shaking hands. There was no time for shock or disbelief. There was only one thing left to do. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her voice trembling as she explained the situation. "I have footage. I need help. Please come quickly." The next few hours passed in a blur. Emma barely remembered what she told the officers, or how long she sat on the couch waiting, clutching Chloe to her side. All she could think about was that video, those whispered threats, the fear in her daughter's eyes. The horror of it played on a loop in her mind. When Derek came home that evening, everything seemed so normal. He walked through the door, calling out a casual, "Hey, I'm home," Derek called out, his tone casual, as though it were any other day. But as he stepped into the living room, his expression faltered. The sight of Emma, Chloe, and the officers froze him in his tracks. His eyes flicked to the teddy bear on the table. He knew. The brief flicker of recognition in his eyes told Emma everything she needed to know. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to sound confused, but Emma could hear the strain in his voice. One of the officers stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Derek Martinez, we need you to come with us. You're under investigation for child endangerment and abuse." Derek's eyes darted to Emma, his confusion quickly transforming into something darker. "What the hell are you talking about?" he snapped. "This is insane. I would never hurt Chloe. She's like my own daughter. I love her more than anything." Emma's stomach twisted at his words, bile rising in her throat. The man she had trusted, the man who had convinced her he loved Chloe like his own, was standing here, lying to her face. The officer held up the tablet, already cued with the video Emma had provided. "We have footage. There's no use denying it." Derek's face darkened, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the tablet. He glanced again at the teddy bear, and this time the mask slipped entirely. His lips curled into a sneer, and his calm demeanor shattered. "You think you know everything, huh?" Derek growled, stepping forward, his fists clenching at his sides. "You think you're some kind of hero?" He glared at Emma, his voice dripping with contempt. "You've always been a stupid, naive bitch, Emma." Emma recoiled as if he had slapped her, her breath catching in her throat. The venom in his voice was chilling, and the sudden change in his demeanor was like watching a stranger, someone unhinged, no longer bothering to hide the darkness inside him. The officer's hand moved subtly toward his taser, his voice low but commanding. "Derek, step back now." But Derek wasn't finished. His eyes burned with hatred as he turned his attention back to Emma, ignoring the officers around him. "You really think I married you because I loved you?" He spat, his voice rising. "You're a pathetic excuse for a woman. I married you because I wanted her." He pointed sharply at Chloe, his tone filled with vile intent. Emma's blood ran cold. Her worst fears, the ones she hadn't even let herself fully articulate, were now spilling out in front of her. Derek hadn't just been abusive, he had planned it from the beginning. "Shut up," she shouted, her voice trembling, her body shaking with rage and disgust. "You're sick, you're disgusting." Derek laughed, a cruel, twisted sound that echoed through the room. "Sick, disgusting. You don't even planning this for years. You were just a tool." Emma felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Her entire body trembled with anger, revulsion, and disbelief. The officers stood tense, ready to move at the first sign of aggression, but Derek continued, now pacing like a caged animal. "And you were so easy to fool," he hissed, "so desperate for love, so pathetic after your first husband died. You were practically begging for someone to come in and save you." "And I did, didn't I? I saved you." "You're insane," Emma choked, holding Chloe tighter, shielding her from Derek's venomous words. "You're a monster." At that, Derek's face twisted into a snarl. "A monster? No, I'm just smarter than you. I know what I want and I take it." His eyes flicked to Chloe, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "She's mine. She was always going to be mine." Emma's stomach turned and she felt the bile rising in her throat. The room seemed to close in on her, but she forced herself to stay composed, to hold herself together for Chloe's sake. She had to stay strong. "You're never coming near her again," Emma spat, her voice low and deadly. "You're done. It's over." At that, Derek's face twisted with rage. Without warning, he lunged forward, reaching for Emma and Chloe with a snarl. "You can't take her from me." The room exploded into chaos. The officers moved instantly, grabbing Derek by the arms, wrestling him to the ground as he thrashed wildly, shouting obscenities. "I'll kill you. I'll kill you both." He screamed, his voice a crazed roar. "You can't do this to me. She's mine. She's mine." Emma pulled Chloe back, shielding her from the horrifying scene as Derek continued to struggle against the officers, his body twisting violently on the floor. They pinned him down, his face pressed against the hardwood, his shouts muffled by the weight of their bodies. "I'll be back," he shouted, his voice garbled as they cuffed him. The sterile white walls and the low murmur of voices made the space feel cold, despite the calming decor. Emma squeezed Chloe's hand, offering a reassuring smile. "We're just gonna talk, sweetheart. You're safe here. No one will hurt you." Chloe didn't respond, but she leaned slightly closer to Emma, a quiet acknowledgement that she understood. When they were finally called in, Chloe hesitated at the door. Emma knelt down to her level, brushing a stray curl from Chloe's forehead. "I'll be with you the whole time," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything you don't want to. This is just to help you feel better." Slowly, Chloe nodded. The psychologist, Dr. Bennett, greeted them with a warm, gentle demeanor. Her office was nothing like the cold waiting room. It was filled with colorful toys, soft furniture, and books lining the walls. It felt safe. Chloe was still quiet, but as Dr. Barr, it was subtle at first, like a fleeting shadow of the joyful child she once knew. But it was there. The darkness Derek had left behind didn't have the same grip on Chloe as it once did. Each session seemed to pull Chloe further out of the shell she had retreated into. There were still hard days when the memories became too much and Chloe would cry without explanation, hiding in small corners of the house. But those moments grew fewer and farther between. Slowly but surely, Chloe was healing. By the time the first few months passed, Chloe was laughing again. She would play with her toys without hesitation, no longer fearing the shadows or the quiet of her own room. She still clung to Emma at times, and there were moments when Emma could see the remnants of fear flicker across her daughter's face. But those moments passed. Chloe was finding herself again, and Emma's heart swelled with pride and relief. She avoided him, much like she had with any man since Derek. But Andres understood. He never forced himself into Chloe's world. He waited, patient, respectful, always gentle. And eventually, Chloe began to lower her walls. It started small. Chloe would sit outside while Andres worked on the fence, occasionally watching him from a distance. Then one day, she asked him a question about his tools. Andres answered her with the same patience and calm that he showed Emma. And to her surprise, Chloe didn't flinch. The next time Andres came over, Chloe stayed a little closer, talking to him briefly before retreating to her mother's side. As the weeks passed, something shifted. Chloe no longer avoided Andres. She started asking him about his work, watching as he fixed things around the house, and eventually she even smiled when he made a joke. It wasn't long before Chloe was helping Andres in small ways, holding nails for him or watching as he repaired a broken shelf. And for the first time in years, Emma felt that they might just have a future filled with happiness, free from the shadows of the past. The months passed gently, each day pulling Emma, Chloe, and Andres closer together. What had begun as an unexpected connection slowly transformed into something deeper. The house felt different now, warmer, filled with laughter, and the kind of quiet contentment that Emma had almost forgotten was possible. Chloe, who had once been so fragile, was now the heart of their small world. And for the first time, the future didn't seem so uncertain. Emma often found herself watching the two of them, Chloe and Andres, when they thought she wasn't looking. Chloe had blossomed into the child she was always meant to be. She was vibrant, quick to laugh, and no longer burdened by the shadows of her past. There were still moments, of course, when the old fears would creep back. There were picnics by the lake, days spent at amusement parks, and quiet evenings where they would sit around the table, talking about their days. Each outing, each moment together, became a brick in the wall of their newfound security. Chloe's confidence grew with every adventure. The old fears and nightmares slowly faded into the background. The joy of the present began to outshine the darkness of the past. She would still talk about Derek sometimes, but now it was with a strength that Emma hadn't seen before. A recognition of what had happened, but also a certainty that it no longer had power over her. The bond between Andres and Chloe deepened. He was more than just a father figure. He had become her protector, her guide, and her friend. She trusted him completely, and it was clear in the way she looked at him, the way she sought his approval and valued his presence. As Emma looked at her family, she knew that they had come through the darkness and found the light. The shadows of the past no longer held any power over them. They had survived, healed, and built a future that was full of hope. For the first time in years, Emma knew that everything was going to be okay. They were safe, they were happy, and they were together. Wow, what a powerful story, right? Although this particular tale isn't based on real events, it reflects a tragic reality that many children face. The story of Emma, Chloe, and Derek shows just how important it is for parents to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. We saw how Emma's intuition led her to discover the dark truth about Derek. It was her persistence and love for her daughter that saved Chloe from ongoing abuse. As parents, we must always be vigilant. Children, especially at a young age, might not have the words to express their fears, but their behavior can often tell a different story. It's critical to pay attention to those changes, whether it's nightmares, sudden shyness, or fear of certain people, and never ignore them. This story also shows us how healing can take time, but is possible with the right support. Chloe's journey toward recovery, with the help of a caring therapist, and Andres' love, reminds us that even the darkest experiences don't have to define a child's future. With love, patience, and professional help, healing is always within reach. Now, what did you guys think? Did this story touch your heart as much as it did mine? Leave a comment below, and let's talk about how we, as a community, can better protect the children in our lives. Remember, no child should face these situations alone, and it's up to all of us to keep them safe. If you like this story and want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's keep this conversation going. Stay safe, everyone.